Hello everyone, myself Nandhini. I'm here to explain about the Android data storage. In this topic, we will just literally see about what is a content provider and what is a content resolver and what is a content URI. So these are the most important thing in your Android data storage. And one more important is what are the crude options or provide crude operations performed in the Android data storage. So first foremost thing is what is content provider. So content provider is like a storing your data in the form of databases. So there are a number of databases. So the content provider means it's a form of storing your data. And also your content provider will be coordinating with the different types of data storage layer, which will be having a number of applications like different APIs and the components. So what are things can be done by using your content provider means it will be sharing your access to your application data with other applications and sending data to the engines and retaining your custom search suggestion for your application by using your thing called search reason suggestion provider. Next thing it will be synchronizing your application data and finally it will be loading your data in your UI by using the cursor loader. So these are the overall architecture view of your content provider, how it's interlinked with all the things which as I previously mentioned in your previous slide. So what is mean by content URI? So content URI is one of the important thing in your content provider. So it is represents the content form of the query strings. So this is the URI content authority data type. So this is the in this type only your URI will be mentioned in your content provider. So what does mean by content means it is a prefix of all URI. It is a one of the mandatory part in your URI. Authority means which will be mentioning the name of your current content provider like contacts, browsers and etc. Data type means which type of data it's indicating the by your content provider. Next thing is your ID. ID means which will represents the numeric value of the your particular records. So this is thing about your content URI. So next comes to your operations. So what are the operations are performed by your content provider means there are four operations are provided in your content provider. First one is your create, read, uh, update, and delete. So create means it used to create a new data. Read means it can use to access the available data. Updates means so the already data which has been done. If you want to update or any modify, so you can update in this existing data. Last one is your delete. So it will be permanently delete your data from your devices as well. So these are the four important operations provided in your content provider. So how this content provider works internally. So your content provider will be interlinked with UI components like activity fragments. So which will be using a object cursor loader. So which this object cursor loader will be sending the request to your content resolver. So the content resolver will accept those requests like create, read, update and delete and to the content provider as a client. So finally, after receiving the request, the content provider will be processing and finally it will be giving to the result. So these are the stages how it can be. So the activity and fragments can be connected. The UI component will be connected with your cursor loader and content resolver. The content resolver will be passing to the content provider. Finally, it go to the data storage. So this is the way how your content provider working internally. So how you can provide a content provider? First, you have to create a class for your content provider, which is extending your content provider base class. Second thing, you have to define your content provider URI. Next, you have to connect your content provider with your database, SQLite database thing. Finally, next you have to implement the content provider to perform the different database specific operation. Finally, you will be registering your content provider with using the provider tag. So these are the ways you can create your content provider in your applications. So how can we implement the content provider for fetching the contact list? First thing you have to add the data class to handle the fleet cleanly. Next, add adapter for the items of contact list. Now implement the content provider. What is content resolver? So the content resolver and content provider will be little bit vary. So one of the main thing of your content provider means it will providing the access to your content. So the content provider will be requesting to the content provider resolver. So it will accept the request. Then it will be directing to the content provider. So this is the way how the content provider and the content resolver are working. And there are some, as we see in the content provider, there are four CRUD options. Same like that, there are some abstract methods like insert, query, update, deletes are then done in your content resolver, which will be using the CRUD options like create, read, update, delete methods. So these are how your content provider, which is interrelated with your content resolver. What is the difference between your content provider and content resolver? As I said, your content provider will be providing the platform for storing data like SQLite databases, and your content resolve, what is the work of your content resolve means it will be accepting a request from your client and then it will be forwarding to your content provider. So the content resolver will be returning the data in the form as cursor, which can be done using your activity or a adapter. So this is the overall function how your content provider and content resolver working in your applications. Next thing, your relationship between your content provider and other. How would is your content providers interlink with your other applications and our components? The only way of your content providers like sharing a data with your other applications. And we will be using the search recent suggestion provider, an abstract that sync adapters, and cursor loader. So these are we have seen in previous things. Same thing it will be explained here. How content providers store data. So content providers store the data in the form of like databases, in the form of databases, files or network, anything. So where it can be stated, we are using a platform called SQLite database where all the most of the data are stored. So next thing is your, why is the content provider storing data in SQLite? Why it necessity? Why we need to store our data in your SQLite database? Because the SQLite data represents the data in the table, and also it supports some operations by content provider, and it returns the data as a cursor, and SQLite will provide the same method and it will work around all the data SQLite database class. So what is mean by URI in Android? URI means like uniform resource identifiers, which for identifying and referring your resource within the outside the applications. So what are the things will be pinpointing here means like files, image, database entries, and any other way of data. So the URI will be like it's a unique address for the resource, which will be allowing the Android to access and interact with it effectively. So these are the different type of URI in your Android. So one is your resource URI, which will be identifying a resource within your app. Example like Android resource and package drawable my email. If you're working with Android Studio, you can able to see these things. Next one is your file URI, which means reference file stored on device file system. Next thing is your content URI, which is access the data managed by the content provider. Next one is a data URI, embed the small piece of data directly within the URI. Next one, parsing URI, which means it uses a function called URI.parse. It will allow to create URI object in your representation of URI, which like scheme, authority, paths, query parameters, using the methods like get query parameters. URI using URI with intents. So how the URI using the intent means how the URIs can, if you click one link, how it can be navigated from the one page to another page. So the URI often in conjunction with the, so always the URI will be interlinked with your intent, because if you launch any applications or anything, if you click on any one options, it will be navigating to the n number of pages. So that why we need to invoke our URI with the intent. So how to create an intent means here is the code called intent web intent, new intent, intent.action view or dot web change. In this way, you can create interlink your URI with your intents. Thank you. This is my end of the cell. I hope you have understood about this Android auto storage.